The intentions of Scott and Jessica Walker to take their infant daughter on a lunch date were derailed when the child would not stop wailing. Later, Jessica Walker looked inside her daughter's leg, and when she saw what was wrong, she screamed. A newborn baby is among the most invaluable and precious things in the world. For this reason, when Canada's parents, Scott and Jessica Walker, first lay eyes on their daughter Molly, they were utterly enamored. Even though she wasn't their firstborn, they could tell right away that 2-year-old Maya would adore her as a playmate and little sister. But on that particular day, they were on the verge of regretting their initial decision to become parents. Scott and Jessica had been raising their baby daughter for 4 months, so they were familiar with the majority of her moods. Both parents were able to differentiate between the cry of a hungry child and the sound of a dirty diaper. And they knew how to calm her down by feeding her, changing her, or giving her a gentle rub. However, Molly woke up and started crying as soon as they walked into the restaurant and were seated at their table. Jessica and Scott exchanged a glance. Did Murphy's Law apply in this instance? If anything can go wrong, it will. They didn't want their first outing following the baby's birth to be marred because this was their first time out from home. They made an effort to ignore the irritated looks and hushed chatter of diners at nearby tables, who appeared to be concentrating on their chattering baby. It was hard for Scott and Jessica to blame these folks. They had not planned to eat lunch next to a crying infant. Molly's diaper was still clean when Jessica examined it. Molly had changed it just before they left the house. That was one scenario that was discarded. Molly's mother offered her a bottle, but the little child turned it down as well, even though it had been her last feeding just an hour before. She simply kept crying. Is she going to cry the whole time? Maya, age 2, was curious. Dad, Scott said. She doesn't know how to tell us what's bothering her. Dissimilar to you, Maya. Though I'm sure Mommy will figure it out soon. You're such a smart girl. Do you think she's teething? Jessica inquired. Although she was aware that kids begin to erupt their first set of teeth at 4 months of age, she hadn't anticipated her daughter to experience discomfort for the first time on their first day of independence in months. Perhaps. Scott concurred. Of course. Miss Molly had to choose our first dinner as the auspicious time for her first tooth extraction. The infant teeth are impatient. What Jessica said was, "Come on, baby. Let Mommy take a look." Molly's mouth agape and her cries growing more and more intense. I could easily poke around her gums. Do you feel anything? Scott questioned tensely. Jessica answered, "Not a thing," while Molly continued to scream uncontrollably. Scott and Jessica were both itching to be home by now, but they had already ordered their meals and would have to wait for them. Every minute seemed to drag on forever as they questioned if they had looked everywhere, tried everything to calm their infant, and tried not to notice the agitated, annoyed expressions on the faces of their fellow diners. They were thankful that no one had spoken out thus far. But this was clearly not how they had envisioned the meal to proceed. Jessica and Scott both attempted to soothe Molly, but to no avail. They exchanged ideas about what might be the cause of their daughter's discomfort. Is it possible that Molly was being triggered by the peculiar noises and odors emanating from the restaurant? Is this the first sign of a cold? Maya, the older sister, was starting to act out as well, while the baby's cries took up all of her parents' time. It felt unfair that Molly was receiving all the attention, And she was sick of always being the one with the rational answer. Maya was wriggling around, appearing like she could be preparing for her own mini meltdown. And she wanted assistance with every meal. Jessica and Scott exchanged a look, obviously thinking the same thing. Things were spiraling completely out of control. They got up and made the decision to forego the meals they had been eagerly anticipating in favor of returning home. Back in their own space, Scott hoped his wife would be able to discover what was truly upsetting Molly. After getting back into the car, Jessica undid Molly's romper because she thought the little girl had a temperature that should keep her calm till they arrive home. She was worried and questioned if Molly might be developing an ailment that wasn't yet identified. Molly had to spend 3 weeks in the hospital after giving birth since she was born a little early, just like her older sister. Although there was nothing particularly wrong with her, the medical staff wanted to make sure that she was developing normally in her early years and that there were no obvious health issues. Fortunately, little Molly's condition quickly improved, enabling her to return home with her parents. Premature babies, however, can occasionally be a little weak. Jessica had seen her fair share of premature babies that were sicker than usual because she worked as a nurse. But Molly appeared to be doing well. The parents had to start balancing their new tiny newborn girl as soon as she got home. Scott and Jessica were much more at ease taking care of little Molly because they had already experienced the process of caring for a little infant with Maya. They planned a schedule that would accommodate the inevitable 24 hours feeding and change sessions while yet allowing both parents to get some sleep. Scott took great pride in being a hands-on father. And eventually, the youngest family member developed a sort of routine. It appeared that they might be able to get ready for a romantic date as Molly grew older and started sleeping for longer amounts of time. They chose a lunch date, and Scott chose a restaurant that would work for their 2 young girls. Even though everything had to be planned in a kid-friendly environment, both girls looked lovely as the day of their important lunch date approached. Scott and Jessica were eager to show off their 2 stunning girls because they were so proud of them. They were also excited about having a supper that nobody had to prepare and spending the evening without having to do the dishes. The whole family was going to enjoy this. And maybe tiny Molly, who was now approximately 19 weeks old, would sleep soundly in her walker for the majority of the afternoon. Sadly, though, a last-minute issue derailed their preparations for lunch, nearly resulting in a fatal situation for tiny Molly. Scott and Jessica Walker had to act quickly to treat their baby girl's fever as soon as they arrived home. Entering nurse mode, Jessica told her husband to prepare a cold compress. Jessica kept an eye on the infant while they anxiously waited for it to work. In a hurry, Scott got Maya in bed. The little girl, understandably, had no desire to sleep at all. Her sister's crying and her father's worried glances towards the door did not assist either. All Scott could do was hope Jessica could calm the infant down quickly. But Molly's fever was not going down as one might have thought. Jessica saw something at that precise moment that would ultimately identify Molly's problem. The infant was still donning her adorable tiny infant socks. Jessica had undressed Molly, but those baby socks ought to have come off first. Her whole body appeared to be tortured with heat. After all, when our body temperature increases unusually, our hands and feet should be the first to cool down. She would have remembered it in a normal situation, but the baby's constant cries had melted her brain into mush and left her entirely forgetting. Jessica Walker could not help but notice how warm her daughter's leg felt as she eventually took off the baby's socks. She let out an uncontrollable cry of shock as soon as she took off the last sock. "What's wrong?" Scott was eager to find out. He was sick to his stomach. Molly had very red feet. This demonstrated just how much Molly's discomfort had been caused by those adorable baby socks. After filling a basin with cold water to relieve her daughter's feet of heat, Jessica saw something much more unsettling. One of Molly's little toes appeared to be extremely bloated. Jessica realized there was no time to spend once she discovered what was causing it. She transformed into a supermom during that crucial time. She calmly gave Scott directions about what to bring her. He ran to the baby room and came back carrying a tiny, delicate pair of scissors, a tweezer, and a flashlight. She then gave him instructions to get the magnifying glass out of the kitchen cabinet. With the use of the magnifying glass, Jessica and Scott were eventually able to determine the exact origin of the issue. They were surprised to learn that something relatively trivial that had caused them so much bother had been disregarded. Had they understood this sooner, they could have saved themselves a great deal of needless tears. One of Molly's toes had a lone hair wrapped around it, severing deep into the tissue, rupturing the baby girl's blood flow and creating excruciating, searing pain. The fever Jessica had originally experienced in the automobile was also caused by it. She understood exactly what had to be done because she was a nurse. She gave Scott the order to keep Molly motionless while she took out the tweezers and clipped that disgusting, annoying hair from her daughter's toe. It was a challenging process. So Jessica used her background in medical care to ensure the hair was trimmed safely. Molly's parents were relieved when she instantly stopped weeping. But the swelling did not go down right away. Before the toe started to resemble normal again, it took nearly 45 minutes. The issue that caused so much grief was surprisingly widespread enough to be given a medical term: hair tourniquet. A hair tourniquet is a dangerous disorder that can induce tissue death or bone erosion. Despite its seemingly trivial source, Molly's situation may have taken a very, very bad turn if Jessica had not taken immediate action. The irritating hair becomes so firmly embedded that it becomes inaccessible if the swelling grows severe enough. And in the worst situations, it might be required to amputate the affected body part. Jessica mentioned that she had witnessed a few instances of this kind in her years as a nurse. And when Scott looked it up on Google, he found further information. A hair tourniquet can happen when a baby unintentionally reaches out to grasp a piece of her most beloved person, a parent or caregiver, affecting both the baby's fingers and toes. Scott Walker followed up with Molly's physician following this terrifying event to ensure her toe had healed appropriately. Jessica's rapid thinking and prompt action averted the situation from getting worse in the future, for which the doctor congratulated her. If the infant kept crying and there was no other reason, he recommended the Walkers to always inspect her fingers and toes. Scott informed other parents, nannies, and caregivers of this possible risk by posting about their experience with Molly on Facebook. He even included a link to a useful article about hair tourniquet cases in this thread. Other vulnerable body parts may also be in danger in this way. Not just fingers and toes. Naturally, infants are unable to communicate to their parents the location of their pain. Over 50,000 people left comments on Scott's post, many of them relating comparable stories about their own children or infants they were looking after. Surgery was necessary in certain instances to treat the problem. Someone even cautioned that adults may have comparable effects. Professionals in the beauty industry who handle clients' hair are particularly vulnerable. Other commenters mentioned that a little infant may also be in danger from thread, fiber, and string. Additionally, Scott posted a sweet after picture that demonstrated Molly's speedy return to her typical joyful self following the removal of the hair tourniquet. Though the family may not have been able to eat out, they did learn a valuable lesson that they will always remember. After watching the story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.